Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Marketing Corner. We are now doing episode 5. But before we get started, Casper, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Still doing great. Excited to be recording some podcasts. What
awesome.
about you, Jen?
I'm doing really well, and I wanted to share with you and our listeners a dream I had because it's super. I know it's so random, but it's very startup-y, and I thought a lot of our listeners could relate. Okay, so hear me out real quick. I had a dream that
Okay.
I was at work, startup,
Yeah.
open plan office, working alongside people, working really hard. And the people in my dream were people I've actually worked with throughout the years. We're all together.
Hmm.
And the CEO comes out and he goes, "Good news, everyone. You've been working so hard that we have this special surprise for you." And we're all going, "Is it a pension? Is it a bonus? Is it, what could it possibly be?" And then these like smoke machines go off and this rapper comes out and he starts rapping, and he's like super 90s with like a upside down sideways visor and like baggy jean shorts, and we're all looking at each other like, is this this is a surprise? This isn't what we want. We want a pension, we want a pay
Yeah.
rate that's on par with the mark. And I was just talking about it with some friends, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so startup life of like
Yeah.
we're gonna reward you with this Friday
Thing that
beers," and
doesn't
you're
make.
like, yeah.
I think we've all been there, right? Like that's why it's
Yeah.
so. I gotta say to listeners, this is the first time I hear about Jen's dream here, but
We don't talk about dreams enough, Casper, in my
no,
opinion.
no, but this is great.
I
But
just
you
thought
see
it
it
was
all the
really
time,
like
right?
on brand.
Yeah, we've all been in a startup, like at least you and I think we're sometimes. I read there's a guy I know called Saran who released a book not too long ago called Innovation Theater. I think he highlights this topic around where like he was in a company before that unfortunately went bankrupt, I think. But they kept getting awards. Like they got awards left and right, and everyone was like, "Yeah, we're getting awards." They were just not making money at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it was like this, like it was like this. Oh yes, we're so cool and awesome, but they were just not making money. So like
Mm.
it was like,
How
it was,
awesome could it be?
like it sounded really cool what they were doing, but essentially it was like really worth it. So I
Yeah.
think that's it ties into your point here.
Yeah.
But that's not
No,
what we're
that's
supposed to talk about today,
that's
though.
not what we're talking about today, but I really just, I don't know, it stuck with me, and I thought
Yeah,
you're a startup guy. Our listeners are startup people.
yeah,
Maybe they'd appreciate that.
they will understand. I think they'll get it.
So if we go 3 minutes over our usual 20 minutes, I apologize. But what are we going to talk about today?
We're talking about we had so it's really cool. We started to get a few requests from people. This I think this one was from Danny Batoon, right?
Yeah, our
Booten, yeah, yeah.
our mutual
Trust
friend.
me, Danny. Yeah. On how to target specific ICPs, ideal customer profiles, right?
Yes.
A little bit do's and don'ts. And to be frank, I think Jen is much more of an expert here than I am.
It's not
So
often I
Jennifer,
hear that from you,
no,
so
come on,
I'm
no,
gonna just let me bask in this a little bit.
I'm not afraid to admit it. Just revel in it, Jen. but so I think you, well, at least in our notes, you have a lot of good points today. So I'll let you kick it off a little bit. So maybe let's start with what is it essentially what is an ICP for you?
Mhm. Yep. So an ICP for us is an ideal customer profile, and this is actually the description of an account that you specifically build your product for. So who is the type of customer? Again, we're B2B. So what is the type of business that would get the most value from your product or your service? Who would actually then give you good returns? So are they the right size? And so right fit. So that's kind of on the account level. And some of these factors include people who would, as I said, benefit from your product, stay with you for a long time, give you a good lifetime value,
Mm,
low acquisition costs because they're a
yeah,
good fit. They're going to benefit, become an advocate for your brand, not likely to churn. What core industries tend to benefit from the product, but also are there industries that don't fit that you should be avoiding? And some other things, geography, for example, also come into play. Do you
yeah,
operate APAC, EMEA, US, Canada, what are the kind of core geographies that you go after?
Yeah, and I think like there's a lot of variables in it, but some of them are like I want to say something like 80% of them you see 100% of the time. Like
Yes.
some of them you see all the time, and then of course there's unique variables that are different from case to case. Like I remember specifically at Templify, the size of the company was crucial, like
Hmm.
for how we evaluated the ICP. Because like just strictly speaking, if you were 10,000 people, the problem with like having everyone access to content, logos, all that stuff, was just way bigger than if you were 50 people. Plus, you
Hmm.
had way more resources to actually buy Templify. It was a bigger use case. So that was a like a key defining factor in it, and I think that's different. That's not for every company. Like, just it is a little bit for United FinTech where I am now, but not in the same degree that it was at Templify. I don't know about you guys. What's like if you could put one variable that's really important to you guys, what would that be?
I think for us, it would probably be industry.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we can be flexible, even though we are at Dixa and also at Planday, we are a subscription based service. So we do, of course, have a minimum where it's not necessarily, okay, we're not going to make enough money off of you. That's not really what we look at, but we look at, you don't really need this. If you're a mom and
yeah,
pop shop with three
that
people,
makes so much sense.
you're going to churn. You don't need this all bells and whistles platform. But if you're 30 people, 40 people, 50 people, then we are actually going to make your life easier. So we can be a little bit flexible on the size, but yeah, if it's the wrong industry, Plan Day, for example, was scheduling hourly paid workers.
Mm.
So you're not going to get a contract worker using that platform. So yeah, it depends on your product and the ideal fit. But I would say mostly it tends to be industry for us.
One thing I've in my younger years, let's put it that way. I know the difference today, but in my younger years, I had a hard time separating ICP from buyer persona.
Mhm.
And how it is in your words, how is that different?
So an ICP, as I said, is like an account, a business that you want to win, whereas the buyer persona is the title or the person within that ICP
Mm,
that you're trying to win.
yeah.
So maybe you have the champion, and then you have the decision maker, then you have the budget holder. So within that ICP, you're going to have, I think now it says, depending on the company size, it could be up to 8 different
Mm,
stakeholders. So
yeah.
8 different buyer personas within the ICP that you need to appeal to in part as part of your buyer journey, and that's where it gets exciting but also
Yeah.
kind of complicated. So and
Yeah,
that comes
no,
in,
absolutely.
so key factors, obviously job title and area of responsibilities, which lead into what are their motivations, what are they trying to achieve, what do they get out of the product, and what kind of challenges do they have that you can kind of solve, because everyone's going to have a different challenge. So
I
for
think that's a
example.
really good explanation. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. One thing I would like to play a devil's advocate here a little bit maybe, but saying like, in your opinion, do you like? I think I have a clear idea of what comes first. But what comes first, ICP or buyer persona? Uh,
ICP first for us.
yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
in B2B, I think ICP like it's definitely the defining one. Because like it like you can have the greatest person who loves your product in the world, but if he's like works for a company where there's just no fit, like no fit
Mhm.
whatsoever, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, and we
Then
find
you
that a
can have
lot actually,
yeah.
particularly at Dixa, we because we do so much CX and customer support, we have a lot of support agents who love our content and find it very useful, but they're in a company that maybe they are the one person army, or they are, they're not going to ever buy Dixa. And we don't discard them in any way. They come to our events, they access our content, but they're not going to be the one that we're going to actively target with lead generation and things like that.
Yeah. For me, it's also like I think the both ICP and the buyer persona ties into one of the most interesting one of the strategic elements, like strategic what are things I pull up out of my back the most, and that's defining the go-to-market strategy, right? Like I
Hmm.
think these two are core elements of defining your go-to-market. Like so, for like let's use a United FinTech where I'm right now. So we like this for everyone listening. What we do is essentially we just buy fintech company. We buy small fintech companies in the capital market space, and then we scale them under one brand. Very short version. But that also means that every time a company comes in, they might have a slightly different ICP and even buyer persona than us. Like, of course, we try to make sure that it's like on the same level, but sometimes you get like we bought a company that has like a B2C product even, right? Like
Mhm.
that's not really a fits into a typical ICP. So here, like these two elements are core in defining the go-to-market. But I think one thing that's missing here is also it's completely tied into your product, right? Because your ICP and your buyer persona can be different based on your product. So
Mhm.
I don't, how many products is it you have in Dixa? How many, like, is it one product or do you have different? How does it work?
We have one product, but different features that you can take or leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for Templify was the same, but at the same time, some of these like modules, features, call it what you want, they were so unique that the use
Mhm.
case was quite different. Like a good example would be productivity plus, as they call it, which is like in PowerPoint you can be super productive. The use case around like the ICP for that was large consultancy firms, because consultants, they what they do all day, and no hard feelings of consultants, they make PowerPoints like all day, every day, right? So that
Right.
was the by far the ideal buyer persona and ideal ICP. But that was not necessarily overall the ICP, because we also had like for instance for some of the contract automation. Well, who writes a lot of contracts? Lawyers do, like legal. So
Mm.
that module, that product had a different ICP. That doesn't mean you can't sell to the others, of course, but it just means that the go-to-market for each thing, each product silo, product module was different.
Mhm.
And that's something I've learned a lot from, and something I use every day in United FinTech, because here we have a lot of different products and a lot of
Right. Yeah.
different elements to tackle in that space. Is that something you've seen before, Jen, too, or is it just maybe just something I stumbled upon?
Well, I think for us, because we are kind of a one product, we look at the ICP. So, for example, what we would do is Casper Industries. We know that you're a great fit. You're going to benefit from our product, but we know, for example, the champion, the person who is like, I need this, is not our
Mm,
decision maker. The champion tends to be this customer service agent, the person on the ground who's like, this is going to make my life so much easier. This is going to help me out. This is going to make me respond to customers faster. And so we make content for them because they're the ones who are going to get our foot in the door. They're the ones who are going to go to their boss and say, hey, can we try this? And actually, this is what happened when I was at Plan Day. Our customer service team really wanted Dixa. And it's, so I've
mm,
seen it happen where they're like, this is going to make our life so much easier. So they go to their boss, and then their boss cares about something else, right? Their boss is looking
yeah,
at statistics, efficiency savings, first response rate, how we can improve that, how we can improve customer satisfaction. And then they go to their boss, and their boss cares about something else. They're like, how much is this going to cost me? How much is this
mm,
going to disrupt business? And so we are making ads and content and messaging for all these different IPs, buyer personas
yeah,
within the business to get them and to empower them to take things to the next level. And then of course you have the IT department. Well, how are we going to integrate this? Does it integrate? Yeah, we got integrations too. So it's a very content heavy approach, but
yeah,
when you get it right, it speeds up the sales process, it speeds up everything, it increases satisfaction. So when you get it right, it pays off. But
absolutely.
Casper Industries is not going to be the same as Montague Industries, is not going to be the same as, like these other
Nah, I
ones. And
get it
so
exactly.
it's a balance of, you can't do bespoke content for every single buyer persona and every single ICP. So, um,
Exactly, because I think that's a really good point. It ties in a little bit, not something I necessarily had on the agenda today, but it's like it ties a bit into this whole idea around ABM, right? Account based marketing,
mhm,
because that's when you take it to the extreme, in my opinion, right? Which is definitely suitable for a lot of companies. We use it in Templify. I'm going to use it here in
mhm,
FinTech, so it's not out. It's definitely a good approach, but that's, in my opinion, that's like technically taking it to the next level, right?
mhm.
Then you definitely say, my ICP is this one company, or like it's
Or
this
this one
person
person in this
in this
company.
one company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's taking it to the extreme. But I also think that's it's a bit. I've consulted a lot of startups over the time, and I think ABM is something. First of all, you have to have a real high lifetime value for that to even be remotely worth it. Secondly, it's not always the first thing you want to do. Like, it's really not. And
Mhm,
somebody companies is like, they hire a head of marketing and then they hire an ABM manager or something. And it's like, okay, whoa, that's that's, don't get me wrong, it's good, but not, maybe a little too soon or too early. So I think that's the one extreme, and then of course there's the other extreme of like ICP where it's like you do a TV ad, right? Like
Mhm.
then you have a very broad ICP probably, and probably a even broader buyer persona. You don't see, of course, you don't see a lot of B2B marketers do TV ads, but it's just an example of being on the other side of the spectrum.
And we recently actually we got a very sophisticated ABM software that we were
Mhm.
working on, but it's kind of like you said, you know, you don't want to shoot too narrow because there's so many stakeholders involved. I mean, for B2B companies, you can have, I think now they say on average it's like 8.6 decision makers and stakeholders in these decisions, right? So if you just go to
Yeah.
one person, that's not going to be good enough. So we kind of combine these inbound marketing and combine these kind of larger funnel, upper funnel campaigns with ABM because we know the decision maker tends to be this job title. But first, we have to make sure that we've laid the groundwork so that when they do get that outreach or they do get that tailored ad, they have heard of us, or when they consult someone, they go, "Oh yeah, we've heard of them," and
Mm.
then that kind of helps kind of put some meat on the bones of the ABM. Otherwise, yeah, you're right. It's kissing on the first date. It's you know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly,
and
right?
it's too
Right.
expensive to
It's too
not do
expensive.
it right.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. One of the things I've one of the things that ICP allows you to do is also it allows you to be more focused, like in everything you do. Like once you have defined an ICP and define multiple, and the same goes to buyer persona, then you could be a lot more specific in your marketing efforts. But one thing that we have before we started this episode, we talked a little bit about incidents at our like previous places where it's like where the ICP becomes somewhat of a problem, almost like not problem, but sometimes like something holding you back. And a good example would be, and I think Templify. I think we always had a like we always knew that we were selling to big enterprises back then, and the industry was a little bit more iffy. We kind of figured that out as long as along the way, and we kept improving that. But one thing I want to discuss with you is how do you like sometimes let's say you get a lead in the door that's not in your ICP in a big company sometimes
Mm.
well that then you exclude it, right? Like sometimes they literally exclude it. And I specifically remember at Templify we did that for some periods where we said like, oh, we won't sell to these. And sometimes we had a company with 50 employees, and I remember we had a company 50 employees in the pharmaceutical industry, and the pharmaceutical, they paid the highest cost per user of all our clients. They had a lot
Hmm.
of money in the pharmaceutical industry, but it was not an ICP in any way. But the use case was good, and we were like, we're gonna be making money. Let's do it.
Hmm.
So my question maybe is more: how do you have a like a strict relationship with the ICP versus making money? Or I don't know how to put it otherwise, but
It's no, and I think that's a really great question because like as you point out, you don't want to turn anyone away, but at the same time you don't want someone that's such a bad fit that they're going to make sales life a living hell, they're going to make products life a living hell because they're going to want all these bespoke, you know, features, and then
yeah,
customer service is going to hate you. And we've done that, you know, I've never been in a company where we've not done that, where we've
yeah,
gone,
exactly.
these guys are huge, you know, this is going to really be a game changer, but by the way they're going to want their own product team because they have a lot of requests, you know, and
Yeah,
this happens a lot, and it's that fine line of looking at the fit, and do you have the luxury of saying no? That's the other question. Are you the
yeah,
size that you can go, you know what, this isn't really going to be a good fit, or are you like, hey, we're trying to get that B round funding, this would really help us out a lot, you know,
yeah,
there's a lot of factors to take into account, and do you have the resources to meet their needs? And I think it's really important to be upfront and honest and loop in people internally. Hey, we've got this customer, but these are the requests they're going to have. Is this feasible?
yeah.
If it's not feasible, what do we need to do to make it feasible? Do we add on an extra cost
Mm,
to get some more developers, or something like that? When I was at Plan Day, we had a huge customer come in and they ended up getting their own product team. They ended up
yeah.
consulting with them regularly. They ended up getting their own customer service team. If you can put that into the invoice, great.
It's all good, right? Like yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? Like we had that, and especially in the early days of Templify, we had like because we were dealing with enterprise customers from the get go, right? So
Mhm.
an enterprise customer, like if we like some of the big names, not gonna mention them here, but some of the big names, they have a lot of
Mhm.
requirements, and we like I could months in and months out, I could hear the like implementation team just going, "Oh God, I'm so tired of these guys." It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
just all over the place, right? But that's what you do in a startup, and that's what you
Mhm.
do in a scale up. I think one thing I have personally learned is that the only thing you can't let a big company do too much, like a big if there's an like in this case, right, is you can't let it dictate your product strategy permanently. Like
Mhm.
it's okay that they sometimes, like especially in the beginning, that you're. And I'm not a product expert, so please take this with a grain of salt. But you can't let it dictate it too for a long period of time, because then you're changing too much. But at the same time, you also have a client that's saying like, "Hey, we're doing this," and then you have to sit down. Okay, is it just for this one client, or is it something we can roll out to multiple?
Mhm.
And it's a bit of a side note, but I think that's a really big part of this actually.
Mhm. Absolutely. We're running a little bit out of time, but I wanted to give us a chance to talk a little bit about targeting them. We talked
Yes.
a little bit about ABM. Dixa, we're lucky that we're in a position that we can implement ABM, but not everyone's in that position. You
Yeah.
are the growth hacker targeting ninja. So, what are some of the ways that you would, using kind of what's available to a lot of smaller startups, how would
Yeah,
you advise
absolutely.
targeting these ICPs?
The thing, of course, it's a hard question to answer because there's so many different ways to do this, and it's so like based on so many different aspects. So like there's like on a fundamental level, there's the normal channels, right? You have Facebook, you have LinkedIn, you have you can even do Google Ads. I think if you want to like make it a little bit more sophisticated, then of course like LinkedIn is a really good. It's my go-to platform for testing if I can hit the right if the ICP fits the value because it's the fastest way to find out if what value proposition I'm trying to position in front of the ICP and buyer persona makes sense. If that's something that resonates with these people, these companies, then LinkedIn is by far, in my opinion, the fastest way to test that. You can also test it with Facebook, and you have to. I've used recently. I've used the Clearbit. It's called Clearbit advertising. Essentially, what they can do is they can replicate the targeting from LinkedIn and insert it into
Mhm.
Facebook, which kind of solves all the problems you have with Facebook, at least from my
Yeah.
perspective.
We use Lead Enforce, which can do the same
Exactly,
thing. You
right?
take
Like,
LinkedIn targeting and apply it. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's great. Like, it suddenly makes the channel worth it, right?
Mhm.
So that's some of the stuff you can do. Like, I remember specifically we did this trick still works. I've talked about it a bunch of times and other things, but one thing I think I want to give myself credit for inventing it together with my boss Glenn back then. But we did essentially what you could do was we discovered that some of our ICPs, a lot of them were using Salesforce, and we had just made a Salesforce integration. So we said, okay, how do we use that information that we know Salesforce is? The people who use Salesforce are really happy with integration and stuff. So okay, then we looked up all the in our ICP. We used a tool back then. It's called Zoom Info, and today so Zoom Info
Mhm.
and Discover or kind of merged together. Anyways, you can use a lot of different tools. Doesn't really matter. But what you can do is you can use a technology lookup. So we looked up all the companies in the world in our ICP area. In our ICP, that means like the company size was one of the primary things. But and then we said, okay, if you're using Salesforce, then we took that and inserted it into LinkedIn, and then we defined it even more based on our ICP. Now we could
Mhm.
suddenly make custom ads that talked about the power of having Salesforce and Templify in one, and it was really good. It performed really well because we were getting closer to what I typically call intent, right? Like we were getting closer to these people. This was close to their everyday life, right? Like we could suddenly use the fact that we knew they were using Salesforce for something proactive.
Mhm.
That's just an example of saying that's something you can do, and you can do stuff like that. You can also another thing I've done is taking Google Ads. There was a point in time, custom intent, but custom intent where you can
Mhm.
essentially insert websites. You can still do this, and then you can say, okay, based on those websites, I want to target people who've been to those websites. It's not
Mhm.
a complete one-to-one retargeting, but if you can then say, okay, I know my ICP likes to hang out on. Actually, help the company not B2C, but it sells swimming goggles. So help the companies sell swimming goggles and like very sophisticated, really cool swimming goggles. So we actually found all the triathlon events over the entire U.S. So all the triathlon events, because all of these triathlon events they have people who use swimming goggles. You have to swim 10 kilometers, so you need really good goggles. So we found
Mhm.
all the sign up pages for those events in that entire country, and we used
Ah,
that as our custom audience. It's
nice.
just to say, like the pool of ideas is quite like it's huge.
Yeah.
Like you can do a lot of things, but like the closer you can get to what they want to achieve and how to do that is the better it typically gets. Right?
We actually do something very similar to that strategy with competitors. So we'll
Yeah,
go on G2 and we'll find our biggest competitors and we'll say anyone who's visited their website, retarget them with the ads, and anyone who clicked on book a demo on
yeah,
company XYZ, show them our ad.
yeah, exactly. And it's
Yeah.
good. It works, and I do the
Mhm.
same. Also, like speaking of which, like there's all this. This is probably not your you just started a startup. It's probably not good to do, but let's say you're a little bit bigger, like scale up size, Pixar size, maybe something United Things doing. Working with intent data, right? So
Mhm.
intent data was the all the rage 1 or 2 years ago. It still is a little bit, but people also found out that it's not a little bit hard to apply sometimes. But I tested it with G2 Crowd, and we can. So Templify was a hard case to do it for, but I so let me use another case. I would use Falcon as a great example. Like the Falcon
Mhm.
IO, the social media tool. Well, they if somebody looks at the so you have social media management, but if somebody looks at something different, maybe it could be I don't know Facebook management or posting or something of these that had I think they have some different categories. Then those are really interesting because that's exactly what you want to do in social media management. And Simplify was more like if you looked at something else, we had to tie it together. It was really clear. But my point is, you can take this data and you can feed it from G2 Cloud, you know, get other intent sources, and then you can see,
Mhm.
okay, if you've been looking at this category, then this is probably interesting to you. And then if you can combine that with your ICP, then you're actually getting to people who are actively looking for a solution while being your ICP. And we get
Mhm.
back to the same point that you brought up before. Super powerful, right? Like that's when you really start to hit the gold.
Yep. And even I'll just throw in even lower kind of tech a strategy that we've also had to use in the past is just calling out your ICP and your ad copy.
Yeah,
You know, um, it's cheap and dirty, but it works. You know, so we
right.
would say calling all customer service agents. Are you are you tired of this? And at least hopefully you're thinking this person at least they have the right job title. They might be the right buyer persona. And then we have to look at the ICP. You know, so you can kind of reverse engineer it.
Mm.
That's kind of an easy if you're a one person army in a very small company, maybe try that. And then anyone who's clicked on that ad probably has that job title.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's we did something really funny at Simplify. It didn't work that well, but it was still really funny. Like, we did these like short video ads that was like text messages, and then we would set insert our ideal. So in this case, it was I think it was the sales manager, right, and the
Mhm.
brand manager, and the brand manager has to keep the sales manager in check with email signatures, and then the brand manager would be like, "Hey, John, is this your email signature?" And then he would send like an email signature with a big puppy in it, like, and it would be like, "Isn't it cool? I love my puppy." And the brand manager's like face palm, and be like, "Oh
Yeah, yeah.
god, what are you doing?" And it was just like it talks straight to the brand
Mhm.
manager, right, who has to deal with this stuff on a daily basis.
There was an ad on LinkedIn I saw. I think it was yeah, targeting similarly it was about targeting marketing managers, and it had a CEO coming down going, "What about branded frisbees? What about have you I don't know if you saw that ad, but it was
Yeah, I saw that
perfect
one. Yeah, I
because
can
it's
remember.
something that yeah, like a lot of marketers can relate to where everyone has an idea, and they're like, how about we do this? How about we do this? Yeah, so yeah, that's a great way of doing it and it's fun. And I
Yeah.
think it also shows that you get them. We get your pain points. We get what you're going through, um, which
One
will
thing I want
resonate
to
more.
add, so just I know
Mm,
we're running out of time, so just at least my final point is just that I found that the hard part is actually not the targeting. Like for me, like of course I'm really techy, but that's never been the hard part. The hard part is the first part, like defining your ICP and buyer persona and redefining it, like
mhm,
refining it over and over again. that's actually hard. Like that takes your real customer data. You need to talk to sales. You need to understand your process. You need to
Mm.
understand these things. Once you have that defined and you can make like your go-to-market strategy, then like then for me it's always been like, okay, so I know I'm targeting a financial finance manager in a large company with 500 plus employees that's based out of Oregon. Okay, cool. I know
Yeah.
how to get that guy. Like
You know how
like
to
that
get them.
person. I can get that.
And that's a really good point. And I think also the thing to remember with B2B is our sales cycle is so long.
Yeah,
So you could take you up to a year to look back and go, okay, these guys were good, these guys weren't good. You have to talk to CS, you have to talk to product, you have to talk to everyone to go, was this a good fit?
yeah,
And I'm very lucky that in the startups I've worked at, we've had Deloitte help us with that in one company. We have
yeah.
a lead
Okay,
intelligence team in Dixa who is completely dedicated to looking at that. So that's I agree with you 100%. That's the hard part, especially for
mm,
smaller startups. The hard part is identifying those perfect customers and then reverse engineer it. Where do they come from? Why are they perfect? Who was part of the buyer journey? And that kind of leads us, I think, back to that attribution episode that we had, where it's like all these
yeah,
different touch points. And yeah, so it takes a lot of effort, but it's totally worth it,
yeah.
in
I
my
agree.
opinion, to put the
I
time
totally
in.
agree. It is.
Yeah.
So the overall point of this episode, do it. If you're not
Do it.
doing ICP buyer persona, do it. Because it's technically a part of like it's a strategy thing, right? Like
Mhm.
but it shapes the foundation for everything that you do.
Yeah,
Do it.
absolutely.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks for listening, guys. And
Yeah, thank you.
this is Casper. Take care. Bye.
Bye.